Hello and welcome back to the 2018 Disruptive Innovation Festival. I'm your host for this session, Colin Webster. Just 3 weeks ago, government officials, corporate leaders, charities and academics gathered together in Bali to sign a document that can potentially change the face of the plastics industry. The new plastics economy global commitment has been signed by more than 250 organisations who between them represent something like 20% of all plastic packaging that's put onto the market. In this DIF session, we'll hear what this commitment represents and what it will ultimately lead to. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, by Dr. Sarah Wingstrand and by Dr. Mats Linders, who are going to talk us through exactly what's going on with this global commitment and the excitement that it's generated. But let me just say to the people online that this, like any other DIF session, is an interactive one, so please get your comments and questions coming through to us on the page in which you're viewing this session. We'll make sure we put your questions to this pair. Matt, first question to you. What is it about this global commitment that makes it so special?
Right, so I think what makes it very special is that this is the first time that a group of organizations have come together and put on paper that they will actually do something. The global commitment is shaped around a common vision that basically describes how to reach a circular economy for plastics, and then also tangible, time-bound commitments to go there. And the New Plastics Economy Initiative, which is this systemic initiative led by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we set that up about 2.5 years ago to really change the way the plastic industry works, trying to move it to a circular economy. And from the beginning, we were engaging and working together with a group of engaged and interested organizations, but now we have a very large group of committed organizations. So that is really kind of a game changer, I would say.
The commitment has created a bit of a splash. I believe it was one of the top 10 items in Reuters News, and it's been reported in many different newspapers worldwide.
We also, so what you're showing here is an open letter that was also published in the Financial Times, signed by Ellen MacArthur, of course, Erik Solheim, who is the head of UN Environment, and a number of important industry people and influencers. So it really shows that this is not just it's just not sort of a vague thing that we're going to do. It is very big and serious. It's by far the most encompassing of the many different initiatives that now exist in the plastic space. But this is the one that was kind of, I'm told, I wasn't there unfortunately, but it was sort of the star of the show at the Our Ocean conference in Bali. It's quite funny. We had the Ellen MacArthur Foundation had a side event that was ran to launch this initiative. And it actually turned out they had to turn people away in the door. It became too jammed with people who wanted to get in. It was a bit of like a rock concert atmosphere.
A rock concert, yeah, you weren't there somehow. I don't follow. Maybe they were turning up to see you, of course.
Yeah, and if I may just add to that, the hashtag for this whole campaign was a line in the sand, or line in the sand. So if anyone wants to know more about it, it's hashtag line in the sand.
Hashtag line in the sand is what to see. And that was a copy of the Financial Times you were holding up where this was published in full. And to give people a flavour of the type of organisations that were involved in it, we've got, well, a scroll through of some of these organisations. I think 250 had started off, but
more than that, yes.
It's more than that now.
We should say this is the beginning. The door is not closed to join the global commitment. The plastic industry consists of thousands and thousands of different organizations, some very big, some very local, but they all play a role, of course. And I think since we launched already, we have already gotten a few hundreds of new requests to sign on to the global commitment, which the team is working hard to process.
Well, that must be a very difficult task to deal with the sheer volume of interested organisations that are coming in here.
I think it's a new challenge for us, but I mean the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, our role I think is to mobilize change and mobilize and transition. In the end of the day, we need the industry to be part of that journey, and therefore it's also essential to have not just the top leaders, but a large group of leaders that both end up backing or aligning on a common vision, as well as making tangible motions towards that vision. And this is really the whole idea of the global commitment.
Yeah, there is a lot of businesses out there that are using plastics in their value chain in one way or the other. So it's really important that we basically create a new normal. It's not just a couple of companies, but we really need to create a fundamental changing. Yeah.
I'd love to come on to talk about how an organisation can help rally lots of companies, governments, etc. around an idea like this. But people at home will be wondering, well, what's in this commitment? And can you give us a bit of a flavour of that, Sarah?
Yes. So the commitment, basically, we're aligning all the signatories behind a common vision, and that is a circular economy for plastic. The circular economy for plastic basically relies on 3 basic principles, and that is to eliminate, innovate, and circulate. So we need to eliminate all the plastic packaging that we don't need. And then we need to innovate such that all the plastic packaging that we do need can be reused, recycled, or composted. And last but not least, we need to make sure that all the plastic packaging that we then end up having in our system is actually circulated. And that is really important, because otherwise, we basically need to design out waste so we end up with a situation where plastic never becomes waste.
So those are the 3 principles that are behind the commitment, but there's a sort of pledge. I don't know if pledge is the right word to use, but what's the commitment that these organisations are actually saying, yes, this is what we're aiming for?
Yes, so the organisations are making commitments specific to their, for example, business. So a plastic packaging producer will have set a specific target for 2025 that will include eliminating all problematic and unnecessary plastic packaging, to switch from single-use to reuse models, to make all their plastic packaging 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable. And then last but not least, we also need to start incorporating recycled content. So they're also setting a target on the percentage of recycled content that there actually be in our plastic packaging.
And it will, of course, vary from business to business or from industry to industry how ambitious you can make these commitments. For example, there are several uses of plastic packaging where we really don't want to, say, move away from a hygienic single-use packaging. Think about medical equipment or medicine. But what we also realize, and what the community around plastics is increasingly realizing, is that it's not building a circular economy for plastics cannot rely only on recycling. There is really there's very little chance of being able to just recycle our way out of this, which is why investigating as a company, as an industry, where you can actually eliminate stuff that maybe you don't really need, and where you can innovate so that you actually, maybe your only option today is something that is designed for only being used once, and that can't be recycled. But maybe we need to investigate how we can move away from that model to a model where we maybe reuse more packaging, design a new way of delivering, say, groceries that doesn't rely on a packaging that is used only once, for example.
And we'll look at what falls into that innovate category soon. 5 different examples, I think, of organisations that are doing interesting things. But could you give us a bit of a flavour of what could be eliminated from the system? Are there easy kills? Can you give us an example of something that...
Something like plastic straws is an example we use in stirrers. Because do we really need that? I mean, if you have a cup of coffee and you want sugar in it, you might actually be able to not have a stir, because it's used for 7 seconds or something like that, and then it's thrown away. It's absolutely insane.
There are many cases where you might as well use a reusable item, a spoon that can be used more than once, cutlery that can be used more than once, or, like you say, not using the item in the first place. And I mean, there is no no clear right or wrong answer. If people really want to use a straw, it's not like, oh, we need to eliminate straws from the earth, but there's also alternative ways of doing straws. You can make them in paper, which would also be single use, but consistent with, say, organic recycling. You can even use edible straws, which there are innovative examples of. You can use straws that are reusable. So there are real examples of how you can do this differently, and that's also an important thing to highlight.
So there are some organisations out there and some people out there. I see a question that's come in from Twitter, where people are being sceptical. What's holding organisations to this commitment of recyclable plastic packaging by 2025? What's your response to those who A, think organisations won't do it,
yeah,
and B, there's criticism of the idea that this doesn't go far enough?
So this is actually what it comes back to what's under the hood of the global commitment a little bit. And one of the things that was really important to the New Plastic Economy Initiative was that a global commitment doesn't only need to be quantitative and time-bound, it also needs to be transparent. So it is actually, having signed the global commitment also means that you're committed to report on an annual basis on your progress towards these commitments, which means that you put your targets out there, but you will also follow up on how you're delivering on these targets. On the one hand, that can feel very uncomfortable to a company, but on the other hand, the mechanism is reassuring because you're not alone, right? And if you create a momentum and we reach sort of a tipping point, it would actually be easier to move towards your targets than if you were moving alone. Or maybe at some point it's even easier to move towards your targets than to not move towards your targets. That is, of course, our hope, our ideal vision. But the point is that if you sign in the commitment, you're signing on to also tell the world how you're doing.
And there's so much focus right now on plastics and plastics in our ocean. And I guess the idea if this stays in the public eye as much as it has done in the last 6 months in particular, there's no hiding place for organisations who say this is what we want to achieve.
No, exactly. I mean, it's part of the problem that it's very hard to point at one place, one source, one organization, and say that here's where the responsibility lies for X million tons ending up in the ocean every year. It is a systemic problem, meaning that every single stakeholder in the system is part of the problem, but they can also be or have to be part of the solution. Mm-hmm. Historically, I mean, we've always struggled in the economy to solve problems that don't have one clear source or one clear responsibility, which is why we are not here where we are today. It's something like 40 years since the recycling symbol was invented. We have spent considerable resources to innovate in technologies to recycle plastics, in infrastructure to collect plastics, and so on, but we haven't reached very far at all. Global recycling rates are terribly low, and I think it's kind of it's a symptom of this systemic nature of this problem. And it was always the ambition of the New Plastic Economy to address that systemic nature by having a new approach involving the entire value chain, making this collaborative, creating this sort of common vision to work towards, and also not saying, I won't move before anybody else, but making sure that everybody's working towards the same goal at the same time.
And give us a flavour, Sarah, of how difficult or how easy it's been to rally lots of organisations behind an initiative like the New Plastics Economy, with the ambitions that it has and with the intricacies of the whole system, as Mats has just described.
It has taken a long time. We have been building up to this point for 3 years, basically, where we really started by laying out our vision back in 2015-16, and then we launched our initiative. And there we started to work with the stakeholders already then, getting people excited about the New Plastics Economy vision. And then slowly we started to see a change, that some of the companies, maybe just a few in the beginning, were saying, you know what, we're actually ready to make some really ambitious commitments here. And then, one company grew to 6, that grew to 12. And when we reached that point, we were starting to really see, we have so much momentum now that we need to make more of a structured framework around these commitments, which then led to the idea of the global commitment. So in a way, it's something we've been building towards for a really long time, and the 250 companies definitely did not come overnight. It's decisions that have to come from the highest point in a business. So it has really taken a huge effort for the entire team to get this many companies behind.
One interesting flavor to add, though, is that yes, it is a long journey, and it's not by far over yet. We like to think of these 250 plus companies and organizations as a start, not an end point. But it has been a very exponential journey still. If just to give some context, I think in 2017, in January, Unilever became the first company to publicly go out and say, by 2025, 100% of our packaging is going to be either reusable, recyclable, or compostable. At the Our Ocean Conference 2017, so that's roughly a year or 13 months ago, Unilever had been joined by 5 other companies. So there were 6 companies with basically the same commitment.
And we were excited.
Yeah. And 1 year later at the Our Ocean Conference, we are with the global commitment now. So it's a truly exponential journey that we, of course, we know it needs to continue to be exponential, given that we're starting from a pretty challenging position, and changing the global material flows of plastic is not happening overnight.
What we're seeing now is, in fact, that it has become, the exponentiality is keeping on going, because what we've experienced after the launch is basically a flood of emails from companies that want to join. So from the 250, we might, be able to actually push it even further.
Yeah, let's not promise anything.
Yes.
But just,
Is there a tipping point in the system somewhere? Can you identify where in the system that all of a sudden... 3 weeks ago. Well, how did you move from 13 months ago to 250? Was there a key organization or a key piece of comms, or was it when you hit 20 organizations? What happened to get from 5 to 250?
It's been a steady build,
Yeah.
I think. So the fact there is these dynamics that, if one company, one large company, in this case maybe Unilever, states that, we have this ambition, then there are other companies that will be like, okay, maybe we should do the same. But yeah, I really think it's been a steady build.
I think it's really hard to pinpoint, like you say, one single event or one single statement by a key person. But it is a number of colluding factors, and I think it also comes down to different triggers working on different groups of stakeholders. And if you think about a few things, the fact that we were very adamant to point out that plastic pollution is not solved by, you can't systemically solve plastic pollution by cleanups, even though it's of course important to keep plastics that has ended up in the ocean and take that out again if we can. It is not necessarily going to stop plastic pollution from happening. So we need to innovate and find new solutions to prevent plastic from becoming waste in the first place.
Yes.
That was not a mainstream thing to say before 2017. But we worked, and we were not the only ones working on it, of course. But we worked very hard. We did a number of things, including the new Plastic Economy Innovation Prize, which was very much designed to find solutions that prevent the plastics from becoming waste. And I know we will get to that in a moment as well. And I think after 2017, it was just like on everybody's lips that, of course we need to find the solutions on the ground, and cleanups is not going to solve this. The next, I think, iteration is this realization that while recycling and infrastructure is critical, we may not come far enough by just investing in recycling and collection facilities. We need to really, as Per, eliminate the plastic we don't need and innovate towards other solutions, we also need to focus on even more upstream solutions. And that's kind of maybe the next wave of insight that I think this just takes a little bit of time to get familiar with it. And once you are familiar with it, which is something we see evident now with the global commitment signatories, it becomes quite intuitive, but it's kind of unintuitive until a point where it isn't anymore.
Okay, there's lots of good questions coming in, which is great, and I'm going to refer to some of those as we go along, but I'm going to ask one right now. Well, not ask one, really, it's more to make a statement to add on to the why people are interested. I think that one of the reasons that organisations are interested is because we're not plastic bashing. Is that a fair way of putting it? That we're not saying plastics are terrible, get rid of them, in the way that I guess some people or organisations do, but we think that they play a valuable role.
Yes,
I
think that's true. I mean, we won't necessarily solve the solution, solve the issue just by moving to another type of packaging material. That can come with a lot of other negative externalities. So we really need to tailor the solutions to the specific applications. And we believe plastics and other materials need to work together there, rather than sort of just broadly saying no plastics.
And I think it's an example that, you know, a systemic problem does not necessarily entail a certain material is wrong or right. It's the system in which plastic exists that is broken, and that's what we need to fix. It's more or less impossible to imagine a modern world where plastics doesn't exist. It brings enormous amounts of benefits to society, which is something we are always very clear with. Same as with most materials, apart from the outright hazardous and toxic ones, like they all have a role to play in a circular economy. But the thing in common is that we need to design out pollution, right? We need to design out the very concept of waste, and the same goes with plastics. Now, especially in packaging, plastic kind of gets to play a villain because it's so visible, and it is arguably one of the most polluting materials. So there's a strong imperative to also fix plastics, but it is at the same time a true workhorse in society that gives us a lot of benefits.
And there's a point about value as well here that we haven't really talked about, the economics behind all this, but I see a question from Rose. She says, I know we are told plastics are bad, but I've heard a lot about plastics having value. Does this global commitment take this into consideration?
Definitely it does. So one of the key points is to innovate. And what lies within this innovation is to design the packaging in a way that it can be reused or recycled or composted in that sense. And what that also means is that you need to keep the material at its highest value at all time. So if a packaging is not recyclable, it doesn't have a value. So we need to design it in a way that it actually has value even after its main function has been, even after it has been used to its main function. So in that way, it really does focus on retaining value in the packaging.
I mean, one way of illustrating how much value we are actually losing, or how much value sits in plastic, is to say, this is how much we're losing. And in the first report, New Plastic Economy Initiative, we actually found that just by looking at the value of the material that we lose from the economy, that's a loss of about $80 to $120 billion.
Per annum? Is that an annual fee?
On an annual basis.
Yeah.
So that's the amount of value that you put into the market that we then get rid of. And someone who's skeptical will say, well, the plastic doesn't have that value in the end of the value chain, so it's not saying that you're throwing away free money. Well, true, but that's also because of the fact that the system is broken. And circular economy, when designed as a circular economy, is not kind of leaking out the same amount of value. We are designing things to retain that value, and that is the idea of also the New Plastic Economy.
I know it's been a couple of years since I know you've talked about this, so bear with me a little bit. I know you're keen on this idea of the reuse and comparing reuse of plastics somehow to shipping containers. I know you talked about that a couple of years ago, Matt. Is this still a nice metaphor you like to use?
Yeah, so, I mean, normally you retain more value in any system if you reuse an object rather than break it down and build it up again through some recycling process. And the same holds for plastics. The shipping and logistics industry has been very good at this for a long time. A lot of plastic containers and other packaging material is designed for reuse today. Where I think there's still a lot of untapped potential is in maybe the end user side of things, where you and I encounter plastics, where most of packaging and containers are today designed as single-use containers. We launched a second report, as some might know, where we actually looked into the potential for reuse as well as recycling in different segments of plastic packaging. And what that report found was that at least, and this is a conservative estimate, at least 20% of all the packaging put on the market could be economically attractive to design as a reuse model. And that's far from where we are today. So there's a big potential to innovate towards shifting from single-use models to reuse models.
So that's you and I are finished with our whatever chicken, whatever we've bought that's come wrapped up in plastic, and there's a way of putting that back into the system, not so it gets recycled, but so it can be cleaned up and reused.
Yeah, and I think that of course comes with having to rethink how that packaging is designed in the first place and maybe what material you use. I mean, some people will nostalgically say, well, maybe we should go back to the old milkman system where we actually have reusable bottles for milk. Now, I don't think that there is like an easy answer to whether or not that is the right way to go for milk specifically. And there are other examples where we have actually moved from reuse to single use many times as kind of an effect of the globalizing economy. I think what's important is that there is a lot of innovation we can think of in which we design clever ideas for reusing rather than single use and recycling. All of these ideas haven't been invented yet, and that's also why we see it so important to push for an innovative mindset in getting rid of stuff that we don't need, as well as designing the things that we do need so that they can be reused.
Okay, so talking of clever ideas, in just a couple of minutes we are going to look at 5 organisations who are innovating around plastic packaging and alternative materials. But before that, let's hear what else is coming up at the DIF from my colleague Daria.
Hello, my name is Daria, and here are the 3 DIF sessions you should look out for. Imagine the world has adopted a circular economy. How would we work and live? Where would our energy come from? Have we really solved the plastic problem? Wonder no more, because this show comes from the future. Be sure to watch 28 months later to find out what happens next. Today at 5 p.m. we'll hear from a world leader in design, Bill McDonough. Bill is always worth listening to, and in this show, he'll tell us about his approach to the 5 goods: good materials, good economy, good energy, good water, and good lives. And here's something a little different for you to catch up on. Many people have talked about how technology is going to change the face of work, but few speak with the fluency and depth of Azim Azhar. My colleague Joe Isles caught up with Azim in Tate Britain for a conversation you should be sure to catch. That's all from me. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Daria. That's just 3 of 150 or thereabouts different sessions that are going on at the Disruptive Innovation Festival this year, and I'm very, very pleased to say that we've had nearly 1 million views of our content in the 2 and a bit weeks that we've been running so far this year. That's fantastic, folks. Thank you very much for tuning in and watching these sessions and for putting in your questions. And I've got all the questions that people have been sending in to me throughout this session. I'll be putting them to Mats and Sarah as we go along. There's one from Joe Miller who talks about the amazing innovations in alternative materials that could replace plastic. Well, Joe, you'll be pleased to hear we are going to look at some of those alternatives right now because, well, first of all, I don't know the whole background behind the new plastics economy, and it was called the Innovation Challenge. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes. well, to try to give the full background, very condensed form. Like when we set out on launching the New Plastic Economy Initiative, we knew that we really needed to stimulate and catalyze innovation to get closer to a circular economy for plastic. It was plain to see that all the technologies, innovative business models that we would need to get there aren't there yet. So innovation was a big part of the full work that we did. And this led us to launch the New Plastic Economy Innovation Prize in 2017, where we specifically targeted two very tough challenges in the entire plastics packaging sector. Coming back to that report that I mentioned, where we found that 20% of all packaging can be reused or attractive with reuse models. That report also found that about 30% of all plastic packaging are designed in such a way that it's really not likely that they will ever be reused or recycled, that they are sort of destined to always become waste after one short use phase.
A little sachet, for example.
Yes, so that is one example. The packaging that are designed to be so small that it doesn't make sense economically to collect it. Even if they did get collected, they typically fall through in the filtering steps of a waste sorting or a recycling facility. So they really kind of that's a design problem. And then you have materials that are too complex to recycle in an economically viable way. And one such category that has grown very fast in the last few years are the so-called multi-layer laminates or multi-material laminates. We encounter them in our everyday life as, for example, crisp bags, coffee packs, or these sachets that also happen to be made of multi-layers.
What's the problem with multi-layer packaging?
Yeah, so they contain more than one type of polymer. As most people know, plastics is a group of different materials that are chemically different, but and therefore have different properties. And the idea with the multi-layer is that you can make a very thin film that combines the properties of these different materials. One of them may be very good at preventing moisture from passing through. Another one might be good at preventing oxygen from passing through. If you can't get both with one material, you combine them. So it's kind of to protect food better. But the unintended consequence, you could say, is that you end up with loads of unrecyclable material that nobody wants or nobody can make use of. So what we did with the Innovation Prize is to say, let's put a challenge out to find materials that can do the job of a multi-layer without being necessarily unrecyclable. Right. And let's put a challenge out where we can design a new solution to deliver products to people without creating the waste that the small format packaging do today. So that was the background.
That was the background. You got entries. How many entries do you know due to get into this, Sarah?
We got around 400, I think.
More than 600.
More than 600. Yes. Oh my God, yes. That's in total for both challenges. Yeah.
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 And you whittled it down to a handful of winners. And
yes. So in the end, we actually picked 11 winners. So 6 from the design challenge, 5 from the materials challenge, to be precise, plus a number of runners-up and honorable mentions. And these 11 winners are now undergoing a 12-month accelerator program. Because in the end of the day, it was a $2 million innovation prize, which by its launch was also the biggest game in town when it comes to innovation for plastic. But at the same time, it's a pretty small amount of resources to change the way we make and use plastic as a whole. And we recognize the need for not just someone to get a cash prize and walk away, but they need also the support of the value chain. They need to improve the business model, to improve the technology. And so an accelerator program where they also got exposed to the group that is part of the New Plastic Economy, we found was maybe even more helpful than a prize in itself.
And that there was a second part to Joe's question, really. It was about how do some of these initiatives take off? And I guess you're answering that by saying, by giving them all of this support, it gives them a firm footing. Yeah. A better start than they would have if they were just in a lab trying to work this out for themselves.
Yeah, or just got a little bit of press for winning something, and then they're standing there and then don't really know what to do with it still.
The audience at home are chomping at the bit to see some of these examples. So let's show them just a handful of them. We don't have all 11 of the winners, but we've got this one here. Matt, you want to talk about this one? This is Evoware.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah, so I think this is one of several great examples of how you can innovate to rethink how we can use the things we don't need or design out the things we don't need. So Evoware is making a wrapping material completely made of seaweed that is sustainably grown in Indonesia in this case. This wrapper is actually edible, and if you put it in hot water, it can dissolve.
Wonderful.
So if you think about all these, a lot of these things that you use, seasoning, sugar, coffee, maybe if you make a cup noodles or a hot soup, a lot of that comes in a packaging material that you throw away afterwards. And here the idea is to just put it in, and it becomes part of your daily nutrition instead.
Top question then, have you tasted it? Have you consumed
I
it?
have actually.
Yeah.
I have actually. Not with anything. So I got the raw experience, and it was not unpleasant.
Oh, well, that's kind of an endorsement.
Yeah, definitely.
So, any idea where they're at in the stage of development, Evoware?
So they are. I think they're getting more orders than they can handle, to put it like that, which is not uncommon if you're a startup that all of a sudden gets a lot of attention. But what they tell me when I check in with them is that they have really gotten a boost by the exposure to the value chain that the New Plastic Economy Innovation Prize has offered. No startup goes from 0 to 100 in 1 year or even 3 years. So I think one thing to remember is like to pace expectations on how fast companies like these can grow. It's also like the whole idea of unlocking investments is one of the key enablers, but it's also not a magic formula, because even if you throw millions of dollars at a small startup, they don't have the capacity to do anything with it immediately. So it has to run its course. It has to grow slowly at first, but just like the New Plastic Economy Initiative, we hope that some of these startups will also start scaling exponentially in time.
Let's move on to the next one. Sarah, you want to tell us what's going on here? This is Miwa. Miwa, have I pronounced that right?
Yep. Miwa is a startup that is rethinking how we can sort of deliver products in supermarkets to the consumer. And basically, they have designed a larger container that can dispense products. And the idea is that you can transport this container throughout the value chain. So you don't need the extra packaging and repackaging throughout the value chain. You just have this container, put the pasta or whatever it is inside this container. You bring it all the way to the supermarket, install it in the supermarket, and the consumer can then dispense however much pasta they want from this. And then they are combining it with the Internet of Things. So basically, it automatically tells the shop owner whatever when it's going low, so they need to order a new one. So that's quite neat. Yeah.
You're not really a startup these days unless you've got Internet of Things
No.
and blockchain
I know.
somewhere in there.
At the same time, like it's not an end in itself, right? And I think they put it to some interesting use. They are actually challenging the way we do shopping, which in a way feels pretty welcome. We have gone to the supermarkets has looked more or less the same for decades, and here instead of like picking your own things down from shelves, maybe not finding it, you basically can place your order either by reading a screen with your phone, and then you check out your goods at the counter, or you maybe order it from your favorite sofa at home before you go down to the supermarket. So it opens up an array of different opportunities for actually how the shopping experience works.
And basically, they're designing out the packaging, the single-use packaging, and doing this. So it's quite.
And not just in the store, like you say, it's an end-to-end, or it's meant to be an end-to-end logistic solution. So you can design out waste all along the value chain, while at the same time providing an opportunity to maybe work better with local producers that otherwise kind of may not have a very easy way of delivering to especially big supermarkets.
I think the neat thing about this also is that it's actually easier if you can just sit in your sofa and order this. There's actually is incentive enough to go maybe to a delivery model without packaging. Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun,
Yeah.
doesn't it? And time is flying. So in 10 seconds, I'm going to give you a wee challenge here. Sarah, you're on this one. Cup Club, what's all this about?
It's a subscription service to reusable coffee cups. So basically, you get your coffee in a reusable cup, and you can hand it back in at a station, and they will wash the cups and put it back into the system.
So you don't have to carry a big plastic cup around with you all day long. It's probably a bit dirty.
Yeah.
Nice. Next one, Mats, for you. Algoramo, what's going on here?
Yeah, so that is a model developed for specifically emerging markets where buying small format packaging actually comes with an extra price because you have to buy them more often, and there's a little bit of markup compared to a big container. So they design out the single-use packaging, and they have a reusable container which the household use over and over again, and a dispenser system to get them the household essentials, both cleaning products as well as basic goods like beans and rice, so on.
And this, I mean, we should have said earlier, this is worldwide, 600 or whatever applicants. They're based in Chile, I believe.
Yes.
This next organization are from Finland. This is VTT. What's the big deal here?
Yeah, so if you look at this, you see plastics, but it isn't plastics. It is a double layer material made out of treated cellulose. So it looks like plastic, performs more or less like plastics, but in the end of the day, you can compost it along with food waste. And I know there are skeptics who say, why don't we just make this out of recyclable plastics? Well, first of all, we know that these go more and more towards being these multi-layers that don't get recycled. And secondly, most markets today, even though technically possible, they don't have recycling capacity for flexibles at all. Which means that even if you chuck your flexible bag or other packaging in your recycling bin, it has a big risk of not being recycled.
Okay, I mean, you said compostable. You can literally put this in your compost bin in your garden.
So there are differences between compostable and compostable. And
I feel we're going to go down.
This is worth an entirely different diff session. Let's say it's compostable in a controlled environment.
Ah, okay. Still, a good step forward. So that's 5 of the winners from the Innovation Prize Challenge. And we had a question from an Andrew who says, how do I get in touch with the companies from the Global Commitment? He has an idea, it seems. And are we going to run another one of these competitions at some point?
I think the answer to the second question is, we'll see. We're not closing that door yet, but we're also not, we don't have that planned out. And I think it kind of comes down to the fact that we are basically gearing up for running the New Plastic Economy Initiative now until 2025 to really help all the signatories of the Global Commitment realize their targets. And as that planning is happening, we're also planning all the activities that go around realizing the goal of creating a circular economy for plastics. So we're evaluating all options, I'm saying.
And we're awfully busy because hundreds of organisations are getting in touch with us to find out how they can be part of this. Give us some closing words, Sarah. What's happening next with the Global Commitment and the New Plastics Economy?
So what's happening next is that we will continue to recruit for the Global Commitment. It will grow. And then we will work towards 2025 to really achieve change in practice and at scale. That was what we wanted when we started the New Plastics Economy, and that is definitely where we will work towards. So the next 6 years is going to be action mode. Yeah, we will work to eliminate, innovate, and circulate.
Awesome. All right, Sarah, Mats, thank you very much for joining us in this DIF session. Thank you very much for everyone who's watched online as well. Thank you for all the questions that were coming in. We appreciate all of them. We can't always get around to all of them, but we really appreciate your thoughts coming in. I hope you've enjoyed learning about this global commitment as much as I have here. It sounds like there's great hope for the future when it comes to the plastic system. Thanks, and we'll see you again sometime.